The dust swirled through the open window of the boarding house room, and Nathan Everett stopped dead in the doorway when he saw her folding dresses into a worn leather trunk, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders as she moved with deliberate purpose that told him everything he needed to know. Nora Ryland did not look up immediately, though she felt his presence like a physical weight in the small room they had shared so many precious stolen moments in over the past 4 months. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed another cotton dress into the trunk, smoothing the fabric with more care than necessary. The late afternoon sun of August 1882 streamed through the window, casting golden light across the scarred wooden floor of the boarding house in Idaho City, a mining town that had seen better days since the gold rush had slowed to a trickle. Nora. His voice was rough, catching on her name like it hurt to say it. She finally raised her eyes to meet his, and Nathan felt his heart clench at the sorrow he saw there. Her green eyes were red-rimmed, and he knew she had been crying even though her face was composed now. Set in that determined expression he had come to know meant she had made up her mind about something. "Nathan, I did not expect you back until tonight." Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor underneath. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded too final in the heavy silence between them. His spurs jingled with each step, a sound that usually made her smile. Not today. He pulled off his dusty hat and held it in both hands, turning it nervously as he approached her. "The fence work at the Morrison Ranch finished early. I wanted to surprise you." He gestured helplessly at the trunk. "What is this?" Nora turned back to her packing, pulling open a drawer to remove her few simple undergarments. She folded them quickly, her cheeks flushing slightly despite everything. "I am leaving on the morning stage, going to San Francisco. My cousin Margaret has secured me a position in a dress shop there." Nathan felt the words like a punch to his gut. He set his hat on the small table by the door and crossed to her in 3 long strides, catching her wrist gently as she reached for another dress. "Why?" She tried to pull away, but he held firm, not hurting her, but not letting go either. When she looked up at him, tears were streaming down her face, and it broke something in him. "You know why," she whispered. "This town, Nathan. The way people look at me. What they say." He did know. Nora had come to Idaho City 6 months ago, fleeing a scandal in Boise that was not of her making. She had been engaged to a prominent banker's son until she discovered he was already married to a woman in Portland. When she broke off the engagement and tried to expose the truth, the banker's family had used their influence to paint her as an unstable woman who had thrown herself at their son. The rumors had followed her here, spread by letters and gossip that traveled faster than any stagecoach. Nathan had met her 2 months after her arrival, when she was working as a seamstress for Mrs. Henderson's dress shop. He had brought his mother's best Sunday dress in for mending, and Nora had greeted him with a professional smile that did not quite reach her sad eyes. He had found himself inventing reasons to return to the shop, until finally he had gathered the courage to ask if he might walk her home after work. She had said yes, surprising them both. For 4 months they had been courting, though quietly. Nathan was just a ranch hand, working odd jobs around the territory, trying to save enough money to buy his own small piece of land. He was 26 years old and had spent the last 8 years working himself nearly to death, sleeping in bunkhouses and under the stars, eating dust on cattle drives, and fixing fences in weather that could kill a man. But when he looked at Nora, 23 years old, with intelligence shining in her eyes and kindness in her quick smile despite what life had thrown at her, he saw a future worth fighting for. But the town had not been kind. Mrs. Henderson had let Nora go last week after several of her prominent customers threatened to take their business elsewhere if she kept that woman employed. Nora had tried to hide it from him, had tried to smile and pretend everything would be fine, but Nathan knew she was down to her last few dollars. "I cannot make you stay somewhere you are not happy," Nathan said slowly, still holding her wrist, feeling her pulse flutter under his thumb. "But I have to know. Is it just the town, or is it me?" Nora's eyes flew to his, wide with shock. "Nathan, no. You are the only good thing about this place, the only reason I have stayed as long as I have. Then what can I do to make you stay?" The words burst out of him with desperate urgency. "Tell me, Nora, what can I do?" She pulled her wrist free and turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "You cannot change people's minds. You cannot make them stop whispering when I walk by, or make the shopkeepers treat me with basic respect, or get me my job back. And I will not let you waste your hard-earned money supporting me while I sit idle. I will not be a burden to you. You could never be a burden. He moved closer, aching to touch her but holding himself back. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Nora spun around, her eyes wide. What? Nathan's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. This was not how he had planned to ask her. He had been saving for a ring, had been planning something special, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was making her understand. Marry me, Nora. Be my wife. I know I do not have much right now. I have about $300 saved, and most of that is set aside for land. But I am a hard worker, and I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Nathan, her voice broke on his name. I cannot ask you to do that. Your reputation in this town is good. If you marry me, people will talk about you too. It will hurt your prospects. I do not give a damn about my prospects without you in them. He closed the distance between them and took both her hands in his. They were small and work-roughened, the hands of a woman who had known labor despite her refined upbringing. He loved these hands. Listen to me. I love you. I have loved you since the day you laughed at my terrible joke about that torn petticoat, looking like it had been in a fight with a wildcat. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you never complain even when I know things are hard. I love the way you read to Mrs. Chen's children when she is too tired, and how you always save the good scraps of fabric to make doll clothes for the little girls at the church. I love you, Nora Ryland, and I will shout it from the roof of the Silver Dollar Saloon if that is what it takes. Tears were streaming down her face now. I love you too, so much. But Nathan, marriage is not going to solve the problem. It might even make things worse for you. Then we leave. She blinked at him. What? The idea was forming in his mind even as he spoke, crystallizing with sudden clarity. We leave Idaho City. There are other towns, other territories, places where no one knows either of us, where we can start fresh. I can work anywhere there are ranches, and you can sew anywhere there are people who wear clothes. We start over, together. But your savings, your plans for land here. My plans were always to build something for a future family. You are that future, Nora. The land does not matter. The place does not matter. You matter. He squeezed her hands. Marry me, tonight if possible, tomorrow at the latest. And then we head north or south, or wherever you want to go, somewhere we can build a life without all this weight on your shoulders. Nora searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She found none. Nathan Everett looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for months finally loosened. Are you absolutely certain? She asked quietly. Because once we do this, Nathan, I am not letting you go. I have been alone and afraid for too long. If you promise me this, if you promise me a fresh start and a life together, I will hold you to it. A slow smile spread across his face, the first real smile since he had walked through the door. I am counting on it. Say yes, Nora. Say you will marry me. She took a shaky breath, and then she was nodding, a laugh bubbling up through her tears. Yes. Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. He let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the small room until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her with all the pent-up longing and love he had been holding back during their proper courtship. She kissed him back just as fiercely, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a long moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, just this feeling of rightness and home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. We need to find the Reverend, today, if he will do it. Nora nodded. Reverend Paul married the Thompson couple last week on short notice. He is a kind man. I think if we explain the situation, he will help us. Then let us go now, before anything else can go wrong. Nathan pulled back reluctantly and grabbed his hat. Leave the packing for later. Right now, we have a wedding to arrange. They hurried out of the boarding house together, Nathan's hand firm and warm around hers. The sun was lower in the sky now, painting the dusty streets of Idaho City in shades of gold and amber. A few people were out, and Nora saw Mrs. Kelly from the general store notice them. and then turned to whisper to her companion. Normally, that would have made Nora's stomach clench with anxiety. Today, with Nathan beside her and a future suddenly opening up before them, she found she did not care. Reverend Paul lived in a small house beside the white clapboard church at the edge of town. He was a man in his 50s with kind brown eyes and silver threading through his dark hair. When he opened the door to their knock, his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Nathan Everett, Miss Ryland. What can I do for you folks this fine evening?" Nathan cleared his throat. "Reverend, we would like you to marry us, as soon as possible, if you are willing." The Reverend's eyes widened further, but he stepped back and gestured them inside. "Well now, that is quite sudden. Come in, let us talk." They sat in his modest parlor, and Nathan explained the situation as honestly as he could, without going into too much detail about the rumors surrounding Nora. Reverend Paul listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "I see, and you are both certain about this? Marriage is a sacred covenant, not something to be entered into lightly, especially not out of desperation." "It is not desperation, Reverend," Nora said quietly. "I love Nathan, and I believe he loves me. The timing may be sudden, but the feelings are not." Nathan nodded firmly. "I have been planning to ask her for weeks now. This just moved up my timeline. I want Nora to be my wife. I want to build a life with her, and I want to give her a chance to start fresh somewhere new, away from gossip and unkindness." Reverend Paul was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Finally, he nodded. "I believe you. I have seen how you look at each other during services. And I have seen how this town has treated you, Miss Ryland, which has troubled me greatly. Christian charity seems to be in short supply around here lately." He stood up. "I will marry you. We can do it right now, if you like, though I will need to fetch my wife to stand as witness." Relief flooded through Nora so strongly she felt lightheaded. "Thank you, Reverend. Thank you so much." "There is the matter of the license," the Reverend continued. "The county clerk's office is closed for the day, but I can marry you now, and you can register the marriage officially tomorrow morning before you leave. Would that suit?" "That would be perfect," Nathan said, standing and shaking the Reverend's hand enthusiastically. "Truly, sir, we are grateful." 20 minutes later, Nora Ryland stood in the small church she had attended every Sunday since arriving in Idaho City, holding Nathan Everett's rough, warm hands in hers while Reverend Paul spoke the ancient words of the marriage ceremony. The Reverend's wife, a plump, cheerful woman named Susan, stood beaming at them from the front pew. The late afternoon light streamed through the plain glass windows, and somewhere outside, a meadowlark was singing. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed Nora with such tender joy that Susan Paul had to dab at her eyes with her handkerchief. They signed the church record as Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Everett, and Nora's hand shook only slightly as she wrote her new name for the first time. "Where will you go?" Reverend Paul asked as they prepared to leave. "North, I think," Nathan said, his arm around Nora's waist in a way that still felt wonderfully new and official. "Maybe Montana Territory. I have heard there is good ranch land up there, and towns that are still growing. Room for new folks to make their mark. Then I will pray for safe travels and a prosperous future for you both." The Reverend clasped Nathan's hand warmly and then surprised Nora by pulling her into a gentle hug. "You deserve happiness, Mrs. Everett. Do not let anyone make you believe otherwise." The use of her new name made Nora's throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. They walked back to the boarding house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and purple. Nora felt like she was floating. The same streets that had felt so oppressive this morning now seemed filled with possibility. Tomorrow they would leave, but tonight she was Mrs. Nathan Everett, and the future was theirs to shape. Back in her small room, which was now their room for this final night in Idaho City, Nathan helped Nora finish packing while they made plans. They would take the morning stage to Boise, then book passage on whatever was heading north. Nathan's savings would be enough to get them settled somewhere new, find lodging, and give them a cushion while he looked for work. "I can take in sewing the moment we arrive anywhere," Nora said, carefully wrapping her sewing supplies in an old shawl. "I do not need a shop. I can work from whatever room we rent." "Only if you want to," Nathan said. "I will not have people thinking I cannot provide for my wife." Nora turned to face him, seeing the stubborn pride in his jaw, the same pride that had probably kept him working brutal hours and saving every penny. She crossed to him and put her hand on his cheek. "Nathan Everett, you listen to me. We are partners now. That means we both contribute what we can. There is no shame in me working, and there is no shame in accepting help from your wife. Do you understand?" He looked down at her, and slowly his expression softened. "You are right. I am sorry. I just want to give you everything you deserve. What I deserve is a husband who treats me as an equal. Everything else we will figure out together." She stood on her toes and kissed him softly. "We are a team now." "A team," he repeated, and she saw the tension ease from his shoulders. "I like the sound of that, Mrs. Everett." That night, they lay together in the narrow boarding house bed, properly married and no longer bound by the strict rules of their courtship. Nathan held Nora close, her head resting on his chest, his fingers tracing slow patterns on her shoulder through the thin fabric of her nightgown. They talked quietly about their hopes and dreams, about the life they wanted to build together. "I want a house with a porch," Nora said softly. "Somewhere I can sit in the evening and watch the sunset, and a garden, if the land is suitable. I would like to grow vegetables and maybe some flowers." "I can build you a porch," Nathan murmured into her hair. "And I am fair hand at garden work, though I warn you, most of my experience is with fence posts and cattle, not roses." She laughed quietly. "We will learn together. I want to give you children if you want them," Nathan said, his voice suddenly serious. "A family. I know we have not talked about that much, but I want you to know I want that future with you." Nora tilted her head up to look at him in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. "I want that too. Very much, though perhaps we should get ourselves settled first." "Agreed." He kissed her forehead. "One step at a time. First, we get to Montana. Then I find steady work. Then we find a place to call home. And then, God willing, we fill that home with love and laughter and as many children as we are blessed with." "That sounds like a wonderful plan." Nora snuggled closer, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had not felt in over a year. "Nathan?" "Yes, love?" "Thank you for asking what you could do to make me stay. And thank you for actually doing it." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for saying yes. For taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than dollars." "You are so much more than that," she whispered. "You are everything." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in months, Nora did not have nightmares about the scandal that had upended her life. Instead, she dreamed of a little house with a wide porch, of a garden in full bloom, and of a tall cowboy with gentle hands teaching a small child to ride a horse. Morning came too quickly, but with it came excitement rather than dread. They rose early and finished packing Nora's few belongings. Nathan only had a canvas duffel with his spare clothes and personal items, which he had retrieved from the bunkhouse at the Morrison Ranch the previous day when he had quit his position. Everything they owned in the world fit into one trunk and one bag, which felt both frightening and liberating. They stopped by the county clerk's office as soon as it opened, a severe-looking man named Mr. Patterson peering at them over his spectacles as they presented the marriage certificate from Reverend Paul. He made them wait while he copied the information into the official register with painstaking slowness, each scratch of his pen seeming to take an eternity. Finally, he stamped the document and slid it across the desk. "You are registered. That will be $2. Nathan paid without complaint, and they walked out of the stuffy office into the bright morning sunshine, as legally married as any couple in the territory. The stage to Boise left at 10 o'clock, giving them just enough time to have breakfast at the hotel restaurant. They were finishing their eggs and coffee when Mrs. Henderson, Nora's former employer, entered the restaurant with two other well-dressed ladies. She stopped short when she saw them, her eyes narrowing. Nora felt her stomach clench, old anxiety rising, but Nathan reached across the table and took her hand firmly. "Mrs." Henderson approached their table, her expression sour. "Miss Ryland, I am surprised to see you still in town. I had heard you were leaving." "It is Mrs. Everett now," Nathan said evenly before Nora could respond. "We were married yesterday evening by Reverend Paul, and yes, we are leaving Idaho City this morning." The older woman's eyes widened slightly. "I see. How very sudden." "Not really," Nora found her voice, drawing strength from Nathan's solid presence beside her. "When you know, you know. I am very fortunate to have found a good man who sees my worth, even if others in this town have been determined not to." Mrs. Henderson's face flushed. "Well, I am sure you will be very happy together. Good day." She turned on her heel and rejoined her companions. and Nora could hear the furious whispers beginning immediately. "That felt good," Nora said quietly, surprised by the truth of it. "Standing up to her like that?" "You have nothing to be ashamed of," Nathan said firmly. "Never did. But I am glad you are starting to believe it." They finished their breakfast in peace and made their way to the stage depot. The morning stage was a sturdy coach pulled by 6 horses, with luggage strapped to the roof and back. The driver, a weathered man with a magnificent mustache, helped Nathan secure their trunk while Nora climbed inside. There were 2 other passengers already seated, a middle-aged man in a business suit and a young woman who looked barely 20, wearing a plain traveling dress and holding a carpet bag on her lap. They both nodded politely but did not introduce themselves, which suited Nora fine. Nathan climbed in and settled beside her, his thigh warm against hers in the cramped space. The driver cracked his whip, shouting to the horses, and with a lurch they were off, wheels rattling over the rutted road out of Idaho City. Nora watched through the window as the town receded behind them. The boarding house where she had spent 6 difficult months, the dress shop where she had worked until her reputation cost her the job, the church where she and Nathan had married, the general store where she had endured whispers and pitying looks. All of it falling away, becoming smaller and less significant with every turn of the wheels. She felt Nathan's hand slip into hers, squeezing gently. She turned away from the window to look at her husband, seeing the quiet understanding in his eyes. He knew what this moment meant to her, leaving behind pain and starting fresh. "No regrets?" he asked softly, pitched for her ears alone. She thought about it honestly. Idaho City had been hard, but it had also brought her to Nathan. The worst experience of her life had ultimately led to the best thing in it. "No regrets," she confirmed, "only hope." The journey to Boise took most of the day, the stage stopping twice to change horses and once for a brief meal at a way station. By the time they rolled into the territorial capital, as the sun was setting, Nora was stiff and dusty and exhausted. But Nathan was there to help her down from the coach, solid and steady, and that made everything bearable. They found a modest hotel near the depot and took a room for the night. Over a simple dinner in the hotel dining room, they studied the stage schedule and planned their next move. There was a stage heading to Lewiston in northern Idaho territory the day after tomorrow, which would put them within striking distance of Montana territory. "We could also go straight to Missoula," Nathan suggested, tracing the route on the map the hotel clerk had provided. "It is a longer journey and costs more, but it would get us there faster." "What do you think is best?" Nora asked. "You know this country better than I do." Nathan considered. "Lewiston is a good-sized town. If we stop there, I could find a few days of work to replenish our funds before we push on to Montana. But if we go straight through, we get to Missoula while summer is still in full swing, which means better weather for travel and settling in." "I like the sound of going straight through," Nora decided. "We have enough money to be careful with, and I'm eager to find our place and stop moving." Nathan nodded. "Straight through it is then. I will book our passage tomorrow." That night, in a real bed in a hotel that did not know either of their histories, they made love for the first time as husband and wife with no fear of interruption or shame. Nathan was gentle and patient, mindful that Nora was innocent despite her broken engagement. He took his time, whispering words of love and devotion, making sure she felt cherished and safe. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the sheets, Nora felt tears of happiness slip down her cheeks. Nathan kissed them away, pulling her close against his chest. "I have you now," he murmured, "and I am never letting go." "Promise?" she whispered. "I promise." They spent the next day exploring Boise, which was much larger and busier than Idaho City. Nora saw the buildings and streets where she had once lived and worked, where her world had fallen apart. But it all seemed distant now, like it had happened to someone else. She was different now. She was Nora Everett, wife to a good man, heading toward a new life. Nathan bought their tickets for the Missoula stage and spent some of his remaining money on supplies for the journey, dried meat and fruit, a couple of canteens, a warm blanket. He also insisted on buying Nora a new shawl from a shop they passed, a pretty blue one that brought out the color of her eyes. "You did not have to do that," she protested even as she wrapped it around her shoulders, loving the soft wool. "I wanted to. First gift I have given my wife. Let me spoil you a little." He grinned at her, boyish and happy in a way that made her heart swell. They ate dinner at a small restaurant and walked along the streets as evening fell, just a couple among many, anonymous and free. It felt like being able to breathe deeply for the first time in forever. The stage to Missoula left early the next morning, and this time they were prepared with cushions and snacks and the warm blanket. The journey would take 4 days with overnight stops at way stations along the route, traveling through some of the most rugged and beautiful country in the territory. Their fellow passengers this time were a grizzled prospector heading back to his claim, a merchant traveling to Missoula on business, and a family with 3 young children. The family, whose name was Anderson, were relocating to Montana Territory, where Mr. Anderson had secured a position as a school teacher. Mrs. Anderson was a friendly woman with tired eyes, and she struck up a conversation with Nora almost immediately. "Newlyweds?" she asked knowingly, watching how Nathan hovered attentively around Nora. Nora blushed but nodded. "Married 3 days ago. How wonderful, and heading to Missoula to start your new life together." When Nora confirmed it, Mrs. Anderson smiled warmly. "It is a good town. We visited last year when Edward was interviewing for the position. The people are decent, and there is real community there. I think you will like it." Over the course of the long journey, the Andersons and the Everetts became friendly. The children were energetic and curious, and Nathan surprised Nora by being wonderful with them, telling stories and playing simple games to pass the time. She watched him make the youngest girl, probably about 4 years old, laugh with delight at his exaggerated tale about a cow who thought she was a horse, and Nora's heart filled with love and certainty. This man would be a wonderful father someday. The way stations were rough but adequate, providing hot meals and beds to sleep in, even if those beds were sometimes just straw mattresses on the floor of a common room. But Nora did not mind. She was with Nathan, and they were moving toward their future, and that made any discomfort tolerable. On the 3rd night, staying at a station near the Montana border, Nathan and Nora stepped outside after dinner to look at the stars. The sky was enormous out here, away from even the small lights of towns, and the Milky Way stretched overhead in a river of light. "It is beautiful," Nora breathed, tilted back against Nathan's chest as his arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "It is," he agreed, "though not as beautiful as you." She laughed softly. "That is terrible flattery, Mr. Everett." "It is the honest truth, Mrs. Everett." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Are you happy? Truly?" She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his bearded jaw. "I am happier than I ever thought I would be again. You saved me, Nathan. You asked what you could do to make me stay, and then you actually did it. You changed everything." "We changed everything together," he corrected gently. "You were brave enough to say yes, to trust me, to take this leap. That took courage. I think we were both brave." She kissed him softly. "And I think we are going to be just fine." "Better than fine," he promised. "I am going to spend every day making sure you know how loved you are." The next afternoon, tired and dusty, but filled with anticipation, they rolled into Missoula, Montana Territory. The town sat in a beautiful valley where several rivers converged, surrounded by mountains that still held snow on their highest peaks even in August. It was larger than Idaho City, but smaller than Boise, with a bustling main street lined with businesses and several churches with tall steeples. The Andersons were being met by representatives from the school, but before they parted ways, Mrs. Anderson pressed a piece of paper into Nora's hand. "This is where we will be staying. Please come visit once you are settled. I would very much like to continue our friendship." "I would like that too," Nora said warmly, and she meant it. Mrs. Anderson was the first woman in a long time who had treated her with simple kindness, with no judgment or ulterior motives. Nathan found them a boarding house on a quiet street, run by a widow named Mrs. O'Brien, who had a thick Irish brogue and twinkling blue eyes. She showed them to a clean, sunny room on the 2nd floor, and did not ask too many questions when Nathan explained they were newly married and looking to settle in the area. "Well, you have come to the right place," she declared. "Missoula is a fine town with good people, always need for hard-working folks. You will do well here, I am sure of it." Once they had settled their belongings and washed off the worst of the trail dust, Nathan headed out to inquire about work while Nora unpacked their trunk and organized their small room. She hung their clothes in the narrow wardrobe, arranged her sewing supplies on the small desk by the window, and made the bed with the fresh linens Mrs. O'Brien had provided. By the time she was done, the room felt like theirs, the first real home they had shared. Nathan returned as evening was falling, and the smile on his face told Nora the news was good before he even spoke. "The Circle M Ranch is hiring for fall work," he said, sweeping her up in an enthusiastic hug. "Cattle drive coming up in a few weeks, then fence work and winter preparation. The foreman liked that I had experience and said I could start tomorrow. Pay is $30 a month plus meals when I'm working at the ranch." Nora did some quick mental math. That was fair pay for ranch work, maybe even a little generous. With that coming in and what they had left of Nathan's savings, they would be comfortable, and if she could start taking in sewing work, they could even start saving again. "That is wonderful news." She hugged him tightly. "I knew you would find something quickly. You are too skilled not to." "I told the foreman I needed to live in town because I had a wife," Nathan continued, settling into the room's one chair and pulling Nora onto his lap. "He said that was fine, that I could ride out each day. The ranch is only about an hour from town. I will have to leave early and get home late, but I will come home to you every night. I do not mind the hours if it means good, steady work." Nora looped her arms around his neck. "We are really doing this, Nathan. We are really starting over. We really are." He kissed her soundly. "And tomorrow, after I report to the ranch, you should go see about putting out word that you do sewing work. Mrs. O'Brien might know people who need a seamstress." Nora nodded. She felt nervous about putting herself out there again, about risking more judgment and rejection. But she also felt stronger now. She had Nathan. She had made it through the worst and come out the other side. She could do this. The next morning, Nathan left before dawn to ride out to the Circle M Ranch. Nora dressed carefully in one of her nicer day dresses and went downstairs to find Mrs. O'Brien in the kitchen, already working on breakfast for her boarders. "Mrs. O'Brien, might I have a word?" "Of course, dear. Call me Bridget, please. We are not so formal in this house." The older woman wiped her hands on her apron. "What can I do for you?" "I am a seamstress by trade," Nora explained. "I can do everything from basic mending to full dress construction. I was hoping to start taking in work, and I wondered if you might know anyone who might have need of my services." Bridget's eyes lit up. "Oh, that is grand. I have been needing someone to take up the hem on 2 of my skirts for weeks now, but I am terrible with a needle. Could you do that?" "Of course. I would be happy to. And I will spread the word to the other ladies at church. We are always in need of good sewing work, and the only other seamstress in town is Miss Paulson, who is nearly 80 and can barely see well enough to thread a needle anymore. Bless her heart." Bridget patted Nora's arm. "You will have more work than you can handle in no time. I am sure of it." True to her word, Bridget brought Nora her skirts that very afternoon, along with a nightgown that needed mending and a shirt that belonged to one of the other boarders that had lost several buttons. Nora set up her sewing area by the window and got to work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of needle and thread. Over the next week, a pattern established itself. Nathan left before dawn and returned after dark, exhausted but satisfied with his work at the Circle M. The foreman, a man named Jack Crawford, was fair, and the work was hard but honest. The other ranch hands were a decent bunch, and Nathan found himself settling in quickly. Nora, meanwhile, found herself with a steady stream of sewing work. Bridget had been as good as her word, and ladies from the church and around town started appearing at the boarding house with mending, alterations, and even requests for new garments. Nora worked diligently, her prices fair, and her craftsmanship excellent, and word spread quickly. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after their arrival in Missoula, Nora was working on embroidering a collar for a customer when there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find a well-dressed woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an assessing expression. "Mrs. Everett, I am Constance Mills. My husband owns the Mercantile on Main Street. I have been hearing remarkable things about your sewing skills, and I wondered if we might talk." Nora invited her in, curious and a bit nervous. Mrs. Mills settled into the chair and got straight to the point. "I have a business proposition for you. My husband's store does a brisk trade, but we have been losing customers to the catalog orders from back east because we do not offer custom clothing services. I would like to change that. If you were willing to work out of a space in our store, we could offer custom dressmaking and tailoring services. You would get a percentage of the profits, and we would handle advertising and customer relations. You would have access to our full inventory of fabrics and notions at cost." Nora's heart began to race. This was an incredible opportunity, far more than she had hoped for. That sounds wonderful, Mrs. Mills, but I should be honest with you. In my previous town, there were rumors about me that cost me my position. I do not want to bring any trouble to your business. Mrs. Mills waved a hand dismissively. My dear, I have been in trade for 20 years. I have learned to judge people by their character and their work, not by gossip. Bridget O'Brien speaks very highly of you, and that woman is one of the best judges of character I know. Besides, this is Missoula, not wherever you came from. We are a practical people. Good work and fair dealing matter more than scandal. Relief flooded through Nora. Then I would be honored to accept your proposition. I will need to discuss it with my husband, of course, but I cannot imagine he would object. Naturally, talk it over with him and come by the mercantile tomorrow if you are interested. We can work out the details. Mrs. Mills stood, smoothing her skirts. I have a good feeling about this, Mrs. Everett. I think we are going to do very well together. That night, when Nathan came home tired and dusty from a long day of working cattle, Nora practically vibrated with excitement as she told him about Mrs. Mills's offer. He listened carefully, washing up at the basin while she talked. And when she finished, he turned to her with a broad smile. That is incredible, Nora. Of course you should do it. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we hoped for. You are sure? It would mean I would be out of the boarding house during the day, working at the mercantile. The money would be good, but I would not be here if you needed something. Nathan crossed to her and took her hands. Nora, I am a grown man. I can take care of myself. This is your chance to build something real, to have a position that is respected and secure. Take it. We are partners, remember? Your success is our success. She threw her arms around him, overcome with gratitude and love. How did I get so lucky to find you? Pretty sure I am the lucky one, he murmured into her hair. Now, what do you say we celebrate? I saw a restaurant on Main Street that looked decent. Let us go have a proper dinner out. They walked to the restaurant arm in arm, and over steak and potatoes, they talked about their future with growing confidence. Things were falling into place faster than either of them had dared to hope. Nathan's work at the Circle M was going well, and the foreman had hinted that if he proved himself on the upcoming cattle drive, there might be a permanent position with better pay. Nora's opportunity at the mercantile could provide real income and stability. We could start saving seriously again, Nathan said, cutting his steak with enthusiasm. For that piece of land, for a house of our own. With a porch, Nora added with a smile. With a porch, he agreed. Maybe by next spring, if we are careful and work hard, we could have enough for a down payment on something small. I like the sound of that. Nora reached across the table to squeeze his hand. Building something that is truly ours. The next day, Nora went to the Mills mercantile and worked out the details of her arrangement with Mrs. Mills and her husband, a jovial man with a shrewd head for business. They offered her a corner of the store, well lit with large windows, where she could meet with customers and do her work. She would receive 40% of the profits from any custom orders, with the Mills taking 60% to cover overhead and materials. It was more than fair, and Nora accepted eagerly. Within a week, she had moved her sewing supplies to the mercantile and put up a small sign advertising custom dressmaking and tailoring services. Mrs. Mills had been right about Missoula being practical. Customers came steadily, drawn by the novelty of custom clothing services and Nora's growing reputation for quality work. September arrived, bringing cooler weather and the cattle drive Nathan had been preparing for. He would be gone for 2 weeks, helping move a large herd to the railroad in Helena. It was the first time they would be separated since their marriage, and Nora found herself anxious about it, even though she knew it was necessary. The night before he left, they lay in bed holding each other close. I am going to miss you terribly, Nora whispered. I will miss you too. But it is good money, and it will get me noticed by the ranch owners. This could lead to even better opportunities. Nathan kissed her forehead. Before you know it, I will be back, and we will be that much closer to our goals. Promise me you will be careful. I have heard cattle drives can be dangerous. I promise. I have done this before, and I know what I'm doing. I will come home to you, Nora. Always. He left before dawn, and Nora threw herself into her work at the mercantile to keep from dwelling on his absence. The days passed slowly at first, each one feeling longer than the last. But she kept busy, taking on a complicated order for a wealthy rancher's wife who wanted an entire new wardrobe, and visiting with Mrs. Anderson and her family one afternoon. The Andersons had settled into a comfortable house near the school, and Edward was enjoying his teaching position. The children were thriving, and Mrs. Anderson, whose first name was Helen, was warm and welcoming. She invited Nora to join a ladies' group that met at the church every Thursday afternoon for charitable sewing projects. "We make quilts and clothing for families in need," Helen explained. "And honestly, it is as much about fellowship as it is about the sewing. The women are kind and welcoming. I think you would enjoy it." Nora was hesitant at first, old anxieties rising, but she remembered Mrs. Mills's words about Missoula being a practical place, and she remembered her own resolution to be brave. "I would like that. Thank you for including me." The Thursday group turned out to be exactly what Helen had promised. The women, ranging from young wives to grandmothers, welcomed Nora without prying questions or judgment. They admired her sewing skills, asked friendly questions about how she was settling into Missoula, and shared town gossip that was more amusing than malicious. By the time Nathan returned from the cattle drive, dusty and exhausted but grinning with satisfaction, Nora had built the beginnings of a real community in Missoula. She had friends, she had work she enjoyed, she had a life that was hers, not defined by scandal or shame. Nathan swept her up in a fierce hug when he walked through the door of their boarding house room, and Nora clung to him, breathing in the scent of dust and cattle and him. "I missed you so much," she said into his shoulder. "Not half as much as I missed you." He pulled back to look at her, cupping her face in his roughened hands. "But I have good news. The drive went perfectly. No losses, no major problems. Mr. Mills, the owner of the Circle M, was impressed with my work. He has offered me a permanent position as a senior ranch hand, with a pay increase to $40 a month. And he is giving me a bonus of $50 for the successful drive." Nora's eyes widened. "Nathan, that is wonderful." "It gets better. There is a foreman position opening up next spring when Jack Crawford retires. Mr. Mills says if I keep doing good work, the job is mine. Foreman pay is $75 a month, Nora. With that kind of money, we could buy land within a year." She pulled him down for a jubilant kiss, her heart soaring. Everything was coming together better than they had dreamed. They were building a real life here, a real future. That night, they made love with the desperate passion of a couple reunited after separation. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked late into the night about their plans and dreams. "I have been thinking," Nora said softly. "Once we have our own place, once things are stable, I would like to start trying for a baby. I know we said we would wait, but I think we are building something solid here. I think we could handle it." Nathan's arms tightened around her. "I would love that. I would love to have a family with you. Are you sure you are ready?" "I am sure. I feel safe here, Nathan. For the first time in so long, I feel like I can actually plan for a future without fear that it will all fall apart." She tilted her head up to look at him in the darkness. "You gave me that. You gave me safety and hope and love." "We gave that to each other," he corrected gently, the same argument they had been having since Idaho City. "You are not just along for the ride, Nora. You are an equal partner in this. Your work at the mercantile, the friends you have made, the home you are building here, that is all you." "Then we gave it to each other," she agreed, smiling. "Together." Autumn deepened into winter, and the pattern of their lives continued. Nathan worked at the Circle M, his responsibilities increasing as Mr. Mills gave him more trust and authority. Nora's custom sewing business at the mercantile flourished, with a waiting list of customers wanting her services. They saved diligently, watching their account at the Territorial Bank grow with each passing month. In November, Nora realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week, afraid to hope, before she finally went to see the town doctor, a competent middle-aged man named Dr. Harrison. He confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was pregnant, likely due to have a baby in early July. She walked home from the doctor's office in a daze, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to be a mother. Nathan was going to be a father. The future they had dreamed about was becoming real. She decided to surprise him with the news in a special way. That evening, when he came home from the ranch, she had prepared his favorite meal and set the small table in their room with the nice dishes borrowed from Bridget. Nathan looked puzzled but pleased by the fuss. "What is the occasion?" he asked, washing up and changing into clean clothes. "Sit down and eat, and I will tell you." Nora served him pot roast with vegetables, and they ate in companionable conversation about their days. When they had finished, Nora took a deep breath and reached across the table to take his hand. "Nathan, I have some news. I went to see Dr. Harrison today." Alarm flashed across his face. "Are you ill? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Everything is wonderfully right." She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby next summer." For a long moment, Nathan just stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile she had ever seen, and he was around the table and pulling her to her feet, holding her close but carefully, like she was made of glass. "A baby," he breathed. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," she confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy? Nora, I am beyond happy. I cannot even find words." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You are sure? The doctor is sure?" "He is sure. Early July, he thinks. Our little one will be a summer baby." Nathan laughed, a sound of pure joy, and picked her up carefully, spinning her once before setting her gently back on her feet. "We need to start planning. We need to find a house. I cannot bring my wife and baby home to a boarding house room." "We have time," Nora said, though secretly she agreed. "But yes, I think we should start looking for a place of our own. Maybe something we could rent with an option to buy." They talked long into the night about the baby, about what they would need, about how their lives were about to change. Nathan was both thrilled and terrified, worried about being a good father, about providing enough, about keeping Nora and the baby safe and healthy. "You are going to be a wonderful father," Nora assured him. "I have seen you with the Anderson children. You are patient and kind and fun. Our baby will be so lucky to have you." "I just want to give you both everything," Nathan said quietly. "I want our child to grow up safe and loved and never have to worry about where the next meal is coming from or whether they have a roof over their head. And they will have all of that because they will have us. We are a team, remember? We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." The next day, Nathan asked for time off to go into town, and together they started looking for a house to rent. There were not many options in Missoula, but they found a small cottage on the edge of town that was available immediately. It had 2 bedrooms, a good kitchen, a sitting room, and, to Nora's delight, a small front porch. The rent was reasonable, and the landlord, an older man who owned several properties in town, was willing to draw up a contract that gave them the option to purchase the house within 2 years at a set price. They signed the agreement and moved out of the boarding house before Christmas, Bridget O'Brien tearfully wishing them well and making them promise to visit often. The little cottage felt enormous after the single boarding house room, and they had to borrow furniture from various sources to fill it. But it was theirs, their first real home, and Nora loved it instantly. She spent her evenings sewing curtains for the windows and cushions for the chairs, making the cottage cozy and welcoming. Nathan built additional shelves for the kitchen and repaired the slightly sagging porch steps. Together, they turned the smaller bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and starting to collect the items they would need for the baby. Christmas came, their first as a married couple, and they celebrated quietly in their little cottage. Nathan gave Nora a beautiful carved wooden box for her sewing supplies that he had made himself during slow evenings at the ranch. She gave him a new winter coat she had sewn from wool she had purchased at cost from the mercantile, lined with warm flannel. They attended Christmas services at the church and had dinner with the Anderson family, and Nora felt a contentment so deep it was almost frightening. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she confessed to Nathan on Christmas night as they lay in their own bed in their own house. "It feels too good to be true." "Nothing is going to go wrong," Nathan said firmly. "We have worked hard for this, Nora. We deserve this happiness. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop and just enjoy what we have built." She tried to take his advice, and as winter gave way to spring, it became easier. She was happy. They were happy. The baby was growing healthy inside her, her belly rounding gently beneath her loosening dresses. Work continued to go well for both of them. Nathan was officially offered the foreman position at the Circle M starting in April, with the increased pay they had hoped for. Nora had to reduce her hours at the mercantile as her pregnancy advanced, but Mrs. Mills was understanding and assured her that her position would be waiting whenever she was ready to return. In March, Jack Crawford, the retiring foreman, approached Nathan with an unexpected offer. He owned a small parcel of land about 2 miles from the Circle M ranch, 20 acres with a creek running through it. He had planned to build a house and retire there, but his daughter in California had convinced him to move west to be near his grandchildren instead. "I would be willing to sell it to you at a fair price," Jack told Nathan. "$300 for the whole parcel, which is well below market value. You are a good man, Nathan, and a hard worker. I would like to see that land go to someone who will actually build a life on it, not some speculator who will just hold it and flip it for profit." Nathan could barely contain his excitement when he told Nora that evening. 20 acres, Nora, with water rights. For $300, we have almost 400 saved. We could buy it outright and still have money left over for supplies to start building." "A real house," Nora breathed, her hands on her swollen belly. "Our own land. Nathan, are you sure we can afford it with the baby coming?" "I am sure. My foreman's salary starts next month. You have money coming in from the work you have already done at the mercantile. We can do this, Nora. We can build the life we have been dreaming about." They bought the land in early April, signing the deed with trembling hands and barely suppressed grins. Nathan spent his Sundays and any spare time he had walking the property, planning where to build their house. He wanted it on the slight rise near the creek, where there would be a view of the mountains and good drainage. Nora walked the land with him, imagining their garden, a chicken coop, maybe a few cows eventually. "We will start small," Nathan said, his arm around her shoulders as they stood on the rise where their house would someday be. "Just a simple cabin at first, 2 rooms and a loft. But we will build it solid, and we can add on as we need to and can afford it. In a few years, it will be a proper house." "It will be perfect," Nora said, "as long as it has a porch." "It will definitely have a porch." He kissed the top of her head. "I promised you a porch, and you are getting a porch." They broke ground on the cabin in late April, with Nathan doing most of the work himself, with help from some of the ranch hands on their days off. The Circle M was between major projects, so Mr. Mills was generous about giving Nathan time to work on his own place. By the end of May, the frame was up and the roof was on. By mid-June, the walls were completed and the windows were in. Nora, now heavily pregnant and moving slowly, spent her time sewing curtains and blankets and preparing for both the baby and the move to their new home. Dr. Harrison had told her the baby could come any time after the first week of July, and she was enormous and uncomfortable, but happy. On July 4th, 1883, almost exactly 11 months after Nathan had found her packing to leave Idaho City, Nora went into labor. Nathan was at the cabin, working on the interior walls, when one of the neighbors came riding out to fetch him, saying Mrs. Everett had sent for the doctor, and he should get home immediately. He broke every speed record getting back to their rented cottage in town, bursting through the door, to find Dr. Harrison setting up his equipment, while Helen Anderson helped Nora through a contraction. Nora's face was red and sweat-soaked, but she managed a wan smile when she saw him. "You are having a baby today," she panted. "Happy Independence Day." Nathan spent the next several hours feeling utterly useless as Nora labored to bring their child into the world. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, and tried not to panic every time she cried out. Dr. Harrison and Helen were calm and competent, guiding Nora through each stage of labor with patient expertise. Finally, as the sun was setting and fireworks were beginning to pop in the distance as the town celebrated, a lusty wail filled the cottage. Dr. Harrison held up a squirming, red-faced infant and announced, "You have a son, Mr. Everett." A son. Nathan felt tears streaming down his face as the doctor cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him in Nora's arms. She looked exhausted and radiant at the same time, gazing down at their son with wonder. "He is perfect," she whispered. "Nathan, look at him. He is perfect." Nathan leaned in close, looking at the tiny face of his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was screaming with impressive lung power. "He is perfect," Nathan agreed, his voice choked with emotion. "You did so well, Nora. You were amazing." "We made a whole person," Nora said, laughing and crying at the same time. "A whole entire person." They named him Thomas after Nathan's father, with the middle name James after Nora's father, Thomas James Everett, born on the 4th of July, 1883, healthy and strong and very loud. The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder as they learned to care for their son. Nathan reduced his hours at the ranch temporarily so he could be home to help, and the community rallied around them. The ladies from the church group brought meals. Mrs. Mills sent over a beautiful christening gown she had found in her inventory. The Andersons visited regularly, with Helen providing invaluable advice about infant care. In August, when Thomas was 6 weeks old and Nora had recovered from the birth, they moved into their cabin on their land. It was small and simple, just 2 rooms downstairs and a sleeping loft upstairs, but it had a wide front porch and windows that let in the mountain light. They had a wood stove for cooking and heat, a good well for water, and 20 acres of possibilities stretching around them. On their first night in their new home, Nora sat on the porch in the rocking chair Nathan had built for her, nursing Thomas while Nathan sat on the porch steps whittling. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Nora felt such peace it was almost overwhelming. "Do you remember that day in Idaho City?" she asked quietly. "When you found me packing to leave?" Nathan looked up from his whittling, his eyes soft. I remember thinking my world was ending, that I was going to lose you before I ever really had you. You asked me what you could do to make me stay." Nora's voice was thick with emotion. "And then you actually did it. You married me. You took me away from that place. You helped me build a whole new life. You gave me all of this." She gestured to the cabin, the land, the baby in her arms. "You gave me everything." Nathan set down his whittling and climbed the steps to sit on the arm of her rocking chair, putting his arm around her shoulders. "We gave it to each other. I could not have done any of this without you. Your courage, your strength, your love. That is what made all of this possible." Thomas finished nursing and let out a tiny burp, and they both laughed softly. Nathan took his son and held him against his shoulder, patting his back gently while Nora adjusted her clothing. "I used to think the worst thing that ever happened to me was that scandal in Boise," Nora said thoughtfully. "Being shamed and losing everything. But now I realize it was not the worst thing. It was the thing that led me to you. If I had married that banker's son, I would never have gone to Idaho City. I would never have met you. I would never have this life. I guess sometimes what feels like an ending is really a beginning," Nathan said, looking down at his sleeping son. "Thomas here is proof of that, new beginnings." They sat together on their porch as the stars came out, a family in their own home on their own land. It had been less than a year since that desperate day in Idaho City, when Nathan had asked what he could do to make Nora stay. In that year, they had married, traveled hundreds of miles, started over in a new town, built careers, bought land, built a home, and brought a new life into the world. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. Nathan thrived as foreman of the Circle M, earning the respect of the ranch hands and the trust of Mr. Mills. Nora eventually returned to part-time work at the Mercantile, bringing Thomas with her in a basket, and later, when he was older, leaving him with Bridget O'Brien, who had taken to calling herself his honorary grandmother. They added a room to the cabin in 1884, creating a proper bedroom for Thomas and giving themselves more space. In 1885, Nora became pregnant again, and in March of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Margaret, after the cousin in San Francisco, who had offered Nora refuge but never needed to provide it. Rose was a sunny, easy baby, the opposite of her serious older brother. Thomas, not yet 3 years old, was fascinated by his little sister and appointed himself her protector. Nora would find him singing to her or bringing her his favorite toys, and her heart would swell with love for her little family. In 1887, Mr. Mills offered to sell Nathan a partnership in the Circle M. He was getting older and wanted to step back from the daily operations, and he trusted Nathan to run the ranch well. It would require most of their savings and taking on some debt, but it was an opportunity they could not pass up. Nathan would own 30% of the ranch, with the potential to buy more over time. They took the leap, and Nathan became part owner of the Circle M Ranch at the age of 31. It meant longer hours and more responsibility, but it also meant security for their family and a real future. The ranch prospered under Nathan's management, and slowly they paid down the debt and rebuilt their savings. In 1889, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This baby came as a surprise, as they had thought their family was complete. But when their second son, Henry Nathan Everett, was born in January of 1890, they fell in love with him instantly. He was a big baby with a loud cry and a stubborn streak that reminded Nathan of Nora. Their cabin had grown over the years, room by room, until it was a proper 6-room house with the wide porch that had always been part of the plan. Nora had her garden, flourishing with vegetables and flowers. They had chickens, a few milk cows, and a barn that Nathan had built with help from the ranch hands. On their 8th wedding anniversary in August of 1890, Nathan and Nora stood on their porch watching Thomas, now 7, chase Rose, 4, through the yard while baby Henry dozed in Nora's arms. The mountains were purple in the distance, and the evening air was warm and sweet with the scent of Nora's roses. "Do you ever think about Idaho City?" Nathan asked, his arm around Nora's waist. "Sometimes," Nora admitted, "but not with pain anymore, just with gratitude that it led me here, to you, to this life. I cannot imagine my life without you," Nathan said quietly. "You and these children, this is everything I ever wanted, even before I knew I wanted it." "We built something good here," Nora said, leaning into him. "From nothing but hope and hard work, we built something real and lasting." "We did," Nathan agreed. He looked down at baby Henry, then out at Thomas and Rose playing in the golden light. "And we are not done yet. There is still more to build, more to dream. As long as I have you, I feel like anything is possible." "Anything is possible," Nora echoed. She turned in his arms to kiss him, the same kiss they had shared hundreds of times over the years, but still as full of love and promise as that first kiss in the little church in Idaho City. "We proved that." Thomas came running up to the porch, out of breath and grinning. "Papa, can we go see the horses? Rose wants to pet the new colt." "After dinner," Nathan promised. "Go wash up, both of you. Your mama has been cooking all afternoon." The children ran off to the pump to wash their hands, and Nora carried Henry inside to lay him in his cradle. Nathan followed, pulling the door closed behind them, but leaving the windows open to the evening breeze. They gathered around the table Nathan had built with his own hands, in the house they had constructed piece by piece, on the land they had bought with saved pennies and hard work. They held hands while Nathan said, "Grace," thanking God for the food and the family and the life they had been blessed with. As they ate and laughed and told stories about their day, Nora looked around at her family and felt the same contentment she had felt that first night in the cabin. This was what she had been running toward when she packed her trunk in Idaho City. This love, this security, this home. Nathan caught her eye across the table and winked, and she smiled back, the same smile that had first made him find excuses to visit the dress shop where she worked. After all these years, they still had the ability to make each other's hearts skip a beat. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, they sat together on their porch in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of their land. An owl hooted in the distance. The creek bubbled over stones. The wind whispered through the grass. "Thank you," Nora said softly. "For what?" "For asking what you could do to make me stay, for not accepting defeat, for fighting for us when I was too scared to fight for myself." Nathan pulled her closer. "Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than sense, for building this life with me." "I would do it all again," Nora said. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear, because it brought us here." "So would I," Nathan agreed, 1,000 times over. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the midst of difficulty and had chosen to build something beautiful together. From a single desperate question in a boarding house room in Idaho City to this porch, this land, this family, they had traveled a long road, but every step had been worth it. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible young man who loved the ranch and the land. Rose was bright and spirited, with a talent for music that led to piano lessons in town and eventually her playing for church services. Henry was the adventurous one, always exploring and getting into minor trouble, keeping his parents on their toes. Nathan and Nora continued to work hard, building the ranch and raising their children with love and firm values. They became pillars of the Missoula community, respected for their work ethic and their generosity. Nathan served on the town council. Nora continued her sewing work, training several young women as apprentices, and eventually opening a small dress shop in partnership with Mrs. Mills. They never forgot where they came from, or how close Nora had come to leaving on that stage to San Francisco. Every year on their anniversary, they would tell the story to their children of how their father had found their mother packing to leave, had asked what he could do to make her stay, and then had actually done it. That is what love is, Nathan would tell them. Not just pretty words, but action. When you love someone, you do not just say it, you show it, every single day. The children would roll their eyes at the familiar story, but as they grew older, they began to understand the lesson their parents were teaching. Love was a choice, renewed every day. Love was work and sacrifice and showing up. Love was asking what you could do and then doing it, no matter how hard. In the spring of 1902, 20 years after that fateful day in Idaho City, Nora and Nathan celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party at their ranch. The house had grown again, now 8 rooms with indoor plumbing and electric lights, a modern marvel that still amazed them both. The ranch was thriving, and Nathan now owned 60% of the Circle M, with plans to buy out Mr. Mills completely when the old man was ready to retire. Their children were nearly grown. Thomas was 19, working full-time on the ranch and courting a nice girl from town. Rose was 16, lovely and talented, with dreams of attending the music conservatory in San Francisco. Henry was 12, all skinny limbs and mischief, already taller than his mother. The party was full of friends and neighbors, people they had known for 2 decades, people who had become family. The Anderson family was there, Edward now retired from teaching, and Helen's hair gone gray. Bridget O'Brien came, walking with a cane but still spry in spirit. Mrs. Mills attended with her husband, both of them pleased with the successful partnership they had built with Nora over the years. As the sun set and people began to leave, Nora found Nathan standing alone on their porch, looking out over the land they had built their life on. She slipped her arm through his, and he covered her hand with his own. 20 years, she said softly. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like forever. Other days it feels like just yesterday. I walked through that boarding house door and saw you packing your trunk. He turned to look at her, his face lined now with years of sun and work, his hair threaded with silver, but his eyes were the same, full of love and steadiness. I would do it all again. So would I, Nora said. She was 43 now, her hair also showing gray, her figure rounder after 3 children, but she felt beautiful when Nathan looked at her, still saw the desire and love in his eyes. Every moment? What do you think? Nathan asked. Should we tell them about the fund we have been building? Nora smiled. They had been saving money for years, putting aside funds for their children's futures. Thomas would inherit the ranch eventually, but they wanted Rose to have money for her music education, and Henry to have choices about his own path. Let us wait until after dinner tomorrow. I want to enjoy this evening first. They stood together on their porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. And Nora thought about the journey that had brought them here, from scandal and shame to love and respect, from a single room in a boarding house to a thriving ranch, from fear and uncertainty to confidence and joy. It had all started with a question: what can I do to make you stay? And the answer had been everything, everything that mattered, a promise of love and partnership, a commitment to build something new, the courage to start over, and the faith to believe in a better future. Nathan had asked the question, and then he had done the work. He had married her, taken her to a new place, supported her dreams, built a home with her, raised a family with her. He had shown up every single day for 20 years, choosing her and choosing their life together. And Nora had stayed, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because Nathan had given her a reason to believe in love again, in herself again, in the possibility of happiness. Together, they had built something neither could have built alone, a partnership rooted in love and respect, tested by hardship and strengthened by joy, a family that was loud and messy and perfect, a home that was simple but filled with warmth, a life that was rich in all the ways that mattered. As the stars came out over the Montana mountains, Nora turned to Nathan and said, I love you, as much today as I did that day in the little church in Idaho City. Maybe more. More for me, too, Nathan said, pulling her close. Every year, every day, I love you more. You are my best decision, Nora Everett, the thing I am most proud of in my life. They kissed on their porch, under the stars, with the sounds of their children inside and the land they loved stretching around them. 2 people who had taken a chance on each other and built a beautiful life from nothing but hope and hard work and love. Inside, Thomas called out that he was heading to bed. Rose was playing a soft melody on the piano. Henry was likely sneaking cookies from the kitchen. The ordinary sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. Nora and Nathan went inside, closing the door on the night, but knowing that tomorrow would bring another day in the life they had created together. There would be work to do, challenges to face, joys to celebrate. There would be graduations and weddings, and someday grandchildren. There would be years of continuing to build and grow in love. But tonight, on their 20th anniversary, they simply held each other and felt grateful. Grateful for a cowboy who had refused to let the woman he loved walk away. Grateful for a woman who had been brave enough to say yes. Grateful for the life they had made, the family they had raised, the love that had sustained them through everything. In the end, it came down to that single question and the answer that followed. What can I do to make you stay? And then doing it. Not just promising, but actually following through, showing up, doing the work, building the life. That was the story of Nathan and Nora Everett, a love story rooted in action, not just words. A happily ever after that they had earned through courage and commitment and choosing each other every single day for 20 years and all the years still to come. As they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, Nathan's hand in Nora's, they both knew that this was what mattered. Not the money they had earned or the land they owned or the success they had achieved. What mattered was this: walking up these stairs together, sharing a life together, loving each other through all the years that had passed and all the years still ahead. They had built something lasting, something true, something worth every moment of struggle it had taken to create. And it had all started with a question and the courage to actually answer it with action. What can I do to make you stay? Everything, and he had done it.